And around 11, when I was 11 years old, I read an article by on Stephen King. And he said something really interesting, which struck a chord in my mind. He said, the moment anybody pays you a cent for your work, you are an author. Till then, you may be a writer. A writer can write for himself or herself. The definition of being an author is you are not only writing for someone else, but someone else is valuing your work enough to pay you.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Leisurely Baatein. My guest today is a senior CXO executive in blue chip multinationals. But more than that, what attracts me to him is he is also a best-selling author. Mainak Dhar, welcome to Leisurely Baatein. How are you doing?
Thank you so much. And it's wonderful to be chatting with you. And thanks for having me here.
It's an honor. Mainak, we all are living in very challenging times. So how are you keeping yourself busy and most importantly, inspired?
Well, Subhadip, I think you're right. We're living through challenging and, you keep hearing that word nowadays, unprecedented times. It looks like something's changing every day. And so I live in Mumbai and we were just told there's a cyclone headed our way today or tomorrow. So it's literally the year 2020 seems to be, you never know what comes your way next. Yeah. So I think keeping busy is not a problem. It's all the usual things we are doing them in different ways. There's working from home. I have a 12-year-old son. He's got his online classes. There is, of course, helping out at home, doing all the housework. So keeping busy is not a challenge. I think the challenge for all of us is how do we stay positive? Just given the anxiety, given the uncertainty all around us, that we're all feeling personally, that we're seeing in the world around us. And for me, when it comes to being positive or being inspired, as you said, it really comes to how do I make sure I'm keeping time for the things that give me energy. Sure. So one part of that's easy, and the lockdown is good in that respect, is I just get to spend much more time with family. Right. So my family is probably the biggest thing that gives me positive energy. So I think the time we're all getting together as a family is precious. I think what's happening in the world around us reminds us, don't take time for granted. Make the most of time you have with people you care the most about. I'm writing, so I'm getting a bit more time than I would normally to write. Right. And the other thing is, I think all of us are discovering new things that we can do during the lockdown. So I used to cook once in a while. Now, obviously, in the lockdown, I've started cooking very regularly. Wow. And more than the act of cooking, I've realized I really enjoy it. Right. So I started with the simple stuff. Now I've gone into, very traditional Bengali stuff, aloo fulgobi dalna and jhinge post. So I never imagined I would be cooking these, and I realized I'm just having a lot of fun. And I think the other thing beyond keeping oneself busy and inspired as an individual is something which I believe in is in tough times. So what can each one of us do to help out? So, helping out with either local charities. A lot of young people nowadays are finding a lot of turbulence in their careers. Offers being rescinded, people not having jobs. So I'm also made an open offer on LinkedIn. Whoever wants to reach out, I'll help where I can, whether it's advice on resumes, whether it's advice on interviews, career advice, acting as a referral. So I'm also trying to help as many people as I can, because I think we're all in the same boat, or at least we're all sailing the same stormy seas. And the more we help each other, the more we'll get through this together.
Absolutely. Well said. And to your point on cooking, I hope you're not messing up the kitchen enough that your wife is after you, because that's often the complaint I'm receiving these days.
No, I make sure I clean up. So I have cleaning duties as well. So the two go hand in hand.
Right. But what I wanted to understand from you is with a busy schedule, how do you manage to keep the author in your corporate self alive?
Well, I guess the first thing is over time, I have realized that these aren't two separate personas. This is me. The things I do, whether it's working in the corporate sector, spending time with family, writing, this is all part and parcel of who I am. So I think once you accept that, it takes away some of the dilemmas or conflict in how do I manage time. And once something is an important part of who you are, I think you find time for it. And for me, there are really two parts to it. One is how clear can you get on your priorities? Because, as they say in business strategy, a strategy is a choice of what you do, but equally a choice of what you don't. All of us have 24 hours a day. So I'm very clear on my priorities. Number one priority is my family. Number two priority are the people who are depending on me at work. It's not the business per se, but there are a large number of people depending on me to make the right decisions, help guide them through tough times. And my number three priority is I'd like some time for myself, to write, for my fitness. So over time, how I have been able to work in equilibrium is really fitting in my fitness and my writing when my family or people at work are not counting on me. And how that works in practical terms, which brings me to the second point, is discipline. I wake up really early. I wake up at 5 every morning. I normally run for at least a couple of hours every morning. And when I'm running, I'm typically thinking of ideas to write. And in a normal day, these are not normal times, but in a normal day, before I wake up my son and pack him off on his school bus, I would have thought of what I'm going to write. I put him on the school bus, and then I write for half an hour every morning. Right. So before I get ready for breakfast and going to office, my writing for the day is done. And before there was a lockdown and before there was a pandemic, and when we were still traveling on work, I would get a lot of writing done when I was traveling. Correct. On flights, in lounges, and hotels. So that's kind of how I've found an equilibrium over time.
Right. Very well said. And I'm sure a lot of our viewers and aspiring authors, especially who are in the corporate job, would gain a lot of good insights from your views on that. Mainak, share with us a little bit about your early life, your first tryst with writing. Very interesting to understand that.
Yeah, so I had I'd say, unusual early life. My father was in the government, and so we lived in lots of different places growing up. I was born in Nagaland, lived in Kolkata for a little while, lived in Sikkim, lived in Delhi, moved to Canada, and then came back to Delhi where I finished my schooling. So literally every 2 to 3 years we were moving. And back then, in the late 70s, early 80s, there was no social network, there were no video games, online gaming. So what kept me busy and occupied and interested as we kept moving was reading. So I developed a huge love of literature. I loved reading. And somewhere along the way, that love of stories led to a love of telling stories. I had a hyperactive imagination as a kid, which I'm sure drove my parents crazy. So to give a couple of examples, this was when I was in Canada. For a couple of years, I had an imaginary friend in my French class called Freddie, and he would sit next to me, and I wouldn't let anyone else sit there, and I would write all his tests for him. And thankfully, the teachers indulged me, and I once wrote a diary about how the world ended. And this was when I was 11 years old. So I think it was a combination of an alien invasion, a meteor strike, and an earthquake. And I wrote a diary, and I gave myself a starring role in how I helped the survivors. And then I buried it in our front yard, hoping that, hundreds of years later, future archaeologists would find it and wonder if this had actually happened. So I had an imagination which was a bit overactive. And around when I was 11 years old, I read an article on Stephen King. And he said something really interesting, which struck a chord in my mind. He said, the moment anybody pays you a cent for your work, you are an author. Mm-hmm. Till then, you may be a writer. A writer can write for himself or herself. The definition of being an author is you are not only writing for someone else, but someone else is valuing your work enough to pay you. Right. So what I did was I had some stuff written, which was hidden in my cupboard. I solved the maths textbook for the next term. I stapled that collection of math solutions and my writing, photocopied it, and sold it to my classmates.
Wow.
I sold 25 copies at 50 cents a piece, made $12.50, came home and told my mother, Ma, I'm a published author. By the way, Stephen King defines it. So I was a bit of a troublemaker as a kid. Some would say I'm still a bit of a troublemaker, but that's when it really got in my head that, look, I love telling stories, and rather than just keep these stories for myself, yourself, the more fun aspect of stories is when you share it with others. I published my first book when I was in college, and that kind of got me going on the path of really being an author. And if I think of my writing journey, we're all human. I lost my way along the way, got into MBA, started my career, got busy with work on the rat race, and I let go of writing for a few years. And I got reacquainted with it after a few years. I lost my mother in 2001 to cancer. And one of the last conversations I had with her is she said, look, you will do amazing things in your career, but one thing I want you to do is not lose the joy you had on your face when you were a little boy telling stories. Wow. So she said, please write. So I promised my mother I'm going to write one book a year till I die. And ever since then, I've been keeping to that promise.
Wonderful, wonderful. Very nice. Mainak, you have written on diverse topics, both fiction, non-fiction. Your initial work as an author was in the non-fiction era, which probably you did when you were in college. Which part of writing, do you enjoy more? Do you enjoy more of fiction or non-fiction?
Well, I'd say, Subhadip, for me, it's less about fiction and non-fiction. I think what I've realized is what I enjoy most is storytelling. So even when I write non-fiction nowadays, so, I wrote this book called Cubicle Manifesto, my most recent non-fiction book was Brand Shastra. They aren't management, quote unquote management books. They're basically storytelling through fables, through analogy, similar, I guess, to your own work, Saleswalah, which, gives concepts, but it's through experiential storytelling. So that's what I enjoy the most, which is telling stories. So I write more in the genre of fiction because I think that lends itself to creating diverse worlds, character building, world building. But even when I write non-fiction, what I've realized is rather than writing more serious, prescriptive non-fiction management books, I love to tell stories, tell personal stories, share learnings, and through that, hopefully, share ideas with others.
Fantastic. Sniper's Eye. That's getting a lot of attention these days, and there's a web series also being planned. By Reliance Entertainment. How excited are you? And please share, your journey from book to screen.
No, I'm very excited and very grateful for all the support Sniper's Eye has got from readers. Its sequel, Sniper's Debt, was published just before the lockdown started. So that was another casualty of the lockdown. The paperbacks never quite made it out the warehouses, but we made it available on digital form. But I'm really grateful for the support readers have given Sniper's Eye. And, it was really interesting where, somebody in Reliance just reached out. They had read the book. They were interested in the work. We caught up over a coffee, and one conversation led to another. And I'm really happy Reliance has decided to develop a web series on it. They did a fantastic job with Sacred Games. So I'm really excited at the potential for them taking this story and, adapting it and making it available to an even larger group of people.
Fantastic. 3 Indian authors and 3 international authors whose work may have inspired you.
Okay, see, I honestly don't think about, I'll probably, I'm bad at following instructions. So that's been something I've always been since I'm a kid. So I don't know if I bucket it as Indian or international, but I'll talk a bit about authors in general who have really inspired me. So I'd say one author who ever since I was a child, I have admired a lot is J.R.R. Tolkien. And what I loved about his work is he didn't just tell a story, he created a world. With its own races, with their own languages, with their own history, with their own mythologies. He created modern epics. Now that is mind-boggling. We hear of our own epics, we hear of the Iliad, Odyssey, Ramayana, Mahabharata, and we hold them up on a pedestal as these epic creations. And here was this man who created these worlds with their scripts, languages, and history. So that's something which I think is a gold standard for any storyteller, where you're not just telling a story, you're creating a whole world which you're sucking people into. So Tolkien is one of the authors I really, really admire. I really admire Stephen King for the breadth of his work. for the way he has been at it over so many years. I mean, that is really inspiring to me. Because I know of many people who say they would like to write a book. It's like a funnel. Some people actually get around to finishing one book. That's hard work. Very few people continue writing, but to continue writing with the excellence of craft that he has over the years is really inspiring. So I'd say these are two of the authors whom I have enjoyed ever since I was a child, ever since I've been reading. Among Indian authors, there are many that I've read and admired over the years. But more than authors, if I talk of books that really struck a chord with me, the Great Indian Novel, I think, was a really landmark book by Shashi Tharoor. Because again, the sheer intellect, imagination it takes to reinterpret the Mahabharata, bring it to life in modern context, again, is something which I'm not capable of. I don't know too many people who'd be capable of that, because grappling with that vast body of work, translating it down to individual characters, nuances, incidents, is just sheer genius. So that's a book which I really, really enjoyed. So those are a few works. So, I mean, that's where, the kind of authors I admire are people who make these connections, who are going beyond just storytelling.
Sure.
And these are some of the authors I've really enjoyed over the years.
Fantastic. Great. Mainak, how do you see the world post-COVID-19?
Oh, that's a very good question. I wish I were wise enough to have the answer. I think all of us are collectively discovering what the world is going to be like day by day as things unfold.
In fact, sorry to interrupt. The reason I'm asking this is I'm asking this to all my guests, and probably I want to make an episode on just these responses in future. COVID-19 we're out of this COVID-19 saga.
So I think one area which I foresee is, at least for the foreseeable future, now who knows, maybe over the years things will change. At least in the foreseeable future, I see us living life in a different way. I think COVID is making all of us adapt. So whether it's corporates having employees working from home, online education suddenly seeming a viable option. As from our own shopping habits, so many of us now shopping online. I think many of those habits, which over the months of the lockdown and the COVID pandemic, we have started adopting, I think people are realizing that you can do many of these things in different ways. And I think some of those habits will stick. Because people are appreciating that it helps with safety, there are real benefits, there are cost savings in some cases. I think those habits will stick. The one thing I worry about, honestly, the optimistic side of me, I try to be an optimist as much as I can, is that through COVID, I would have hoped that more and more people around the world faced with a common enemy would have led to us coming together. Us realizing that our differences of religion, race, language, political affiliation are nothing when compared to the fact that, we are all humans, we are all mortal. And unfortunately, what's happening in the world around us tends to belie that optimism at times when one sees what's happening in many countries. So that's something which I would hope we have more and more people have that realization. But I realize we live in an imperfect world, but I'm still hoping for the best, that it just takes a few more people to think differently. That are our differences really that big? Are these debates really that important versus all the things that unite us? So that's the one part which I worry about. But I think there'll be many habit changes which are going to happen, and in many cases for the better.
Sure. Well, thank you so much. They were wonderful insights, and it was a pleasure sharing thoughts with you. I wish you all the very best for your future and for both your career as an author as well as from the professional side. And I look forward to seeing you on the other side of COVID-19 over a cup of coffee in person.
Thank you so much, Subhadip, and all the best to you and your family. And indeed, once all of this blows over, look forward to catching up in person as well. Thank you for having me.